All righty. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in a few here. We'll just wait for a little bit more people to join us, and then we'll get started. We'll probably start in about 5 minutes. Good morning once again. We'll get started in a little bit. Just waiting on more people to join. All right, folks. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, let's get started here. Well, hello everyone, and welcome. I'm thrilled everyone is here. My name is Renee Figueroa from iLink Digital, and today we're going to break down how to unlock the full potential of the Power Platform while staying secure, compliant, and scalable. And so, what this means that we'll explore the Center of Excellence Toolkit. We're going to explore governance pillars surrounding governing the Power Platform and the practical steps you could take to build out a thriving, scalable, low-code culture. Alrighty, let's get started here. So, who am I? I am a solution architect for our Dex Lab group at iLink Digital. I've been working exclusively with the Power Platform for 8 years, and I conduct regularly monthly events or in-a-day sessions for Microsoft as well. And for today's session, there will be at least one active moderator in the chat. His name is Ranjit. He'll be able to answer any questions you place in the chat. And if you're able to stick along to the end, we'll be conducting a live Q&A as well. Alrighty. So before we get started, a little bit about iLink Digital. So iLink Digital is a suite of technology and service capabilities. Here at iLink Digital, we like to thrive on our capability of innovating and transforming through AI-driven digital engineering, data analytics and AI, IoT, sales and marketing enablement, RPA, managed operations, and even Salesforce consulting. So a lot of that comes into play when we manage a global digital transformation across many countries and many industries. And one of our many offerings involve kind of having that global presence. And a little bit more about iLink Digital, the company itself. It's a company that was formed in 2002, and we provide digital transformation solutions, and we're a highly recognized Microsoft partner, AWS partner, and Salesforce partner, with a distinction in Microsoft where we've had 9 Microsoft Partner of the Year awards. And also, we're also ISO 9001 and CMMI L3 certified and recognized by Inc. 5000 for 7 years now. And so, speaking of industries, we span across many different industries. And one of our many trusted technology partners are the ones you see here on the screen. As you can see here, we span across the healthcare and life science industries, retail and consumer goods, the telecom industries, the financial services industries, even manufacturing and nonprofit and governments. So we do provide a lot of good as well. All right, a little bit of our strategic alignment with Microsoft. We are a nationally managed Microsoft partner in the United States. So what does that mean? Is that we are a go-to partner for Microsoft, which allows us to engage multiple organizations and provide multiple use cases for a lot of organizations across the globe and a lot of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 customers, which then has earned us multiple solution partner awards and designations for proficiency in 6 specific solution areas. So a lot of good things we've done in the past and continue doing. And so that kind of leads me into what we offer specifically for the Power Platform. So like I was mentioning before, we do offer in-a-day workshops where we kind of take a day and go through creating applications, creating flows for a specific business scenario. We offer Power Platform Center of Excellence work as well. We offer product comparison and ROI analysis, design and architecture on apps and flows, and development and deployment of any kind of solution in the Power Platform, with also a focus on citizen developer strategy and guidance. So all good stuff wrapped up in our offerings. All right. let's concentrate on what we're here for today. So today's agenda is going to be the following. We'll be going over how imperative governance is for the Power Platform. We'll be introducing the toolkit, Center Events Excellence Starter Kit. We'll be going over some strategies surrounding governance, and then we'll be kind of conducting a live Q&A at the end. So let's go ahead and kick it off, right? All right. So let's start with the why. Why does governance matter? Governance is your safety net. It enables safe scaling of low code. It will prevent costly compliance issues, which no one wants to read about on the front page, right? And so then it would allow you to accelerate innovation, but in a controlled way. And so what that means is that good governance doesn't slow you down. It's not meant to slow you down. It's meant to give your makers the confidence, not only the confidence, but also the path to build faster, but also build safely because they know the guardrails are there. And of course, it reduces your operational risks and overall costs. So with the appropriate governance strategy, not only are your end users building faster, but they're building safer and you're saving money at the same time. So that's why governance matters. So think about all the hidden costs when apps go rogue or when IT has to untangle messy, duplicated work. Governance would dramatically cut through that waste. So, what are the risks, right? Without a good formulated governance plan, the risks might multiply fast. We're talking about major sprawl here, right? So, first, you open the door to increase security vulnerabilities, unmonitored connectors, unauthorized sharing, orphaned apps. These are all just the the first things that come up when you're dealing with real threats of ungoverned low code environments. Second, you're exposed to compliance breaches. Data can end up in places it shouldn't. And so for a lot of organizations that require regulation and auditing, that's a big red flag. And so for you to be on board on how to manage these environments, you have to have a good formulated governed strategy. And so third, app duplication and wasted resources drain your ROI. So when multiple teams unknowingly solve the same problem in silos, you almost lose visibility through consistency and revenue streams. So we do see this pattern over and over, and that's exactly why the COE Starter Kit exists. And so the Microsoft COE Starter Kit, just to kind of give you a brief overview, is an open source set of templates, apps, and automations that give you a framework to manage the Power Platform adoption at scale. And so at its heart, it does four particular things. It gives you centralized management and insight. It automates security and compliance enforcement. It supports structured maker enablement. And it also provides robust analytics and reporting. So it's not just a monitoring tool, it's actually a blueprint on how to build a responsible and healthy low code culture. And that's why we start our strategies with this particular toolkit because it's a great foundational step into a scalable governing strategy. So, a little bit about the toolkit, right? So let's kind of go over the components, the core components. The core components are essentially your foundation for the toolkit. They give you a complete inventory of apps, flows, makers, and environments. Think of it as your single pane of glass, all your assets in one place. Then you have detailed reporting through the Power BI dashboards. So you just don't see how many apps exist. You see who's using them, who owns them, how they're performing, and where risks might hide. And so with the starter kit dashboard, you can make this data actionable so your governance team can act quickly. And moving on to the next component, Next, the governance components automate and strengthen your security and compliance. So the governance components are meant to enforce your DLP policies. Your DLP policies are meant there to protect the users. And so with a good preventative DLP policy strategy, you have someone um, to create solutions in a more safer environment. And so with the governance components, you can actually facilitate this process much easier because with this particular component, you can have automatic enforcement of the DLP policies, real-time alerts, and also lifecycle management to kind of approve automated archival and cleanup of inactive apps and flows. So the governance components is actually it reduces clutter and it lowers your risk and keeps your environments tidy and secure. A lot of good things come from the governance components. It's very useful. And so government isn't just about rules, right? It's about empowering the people the right way. And what does this mean? With the nurturing components, that's exactly what it's going to do. The nurturing components will do exactly that, where new makers get to onboard through the Maker Welcome app. They get access to pre-approved templates, so they don't reinvent the wheel. So essentially, what you could do with the nurturing component is set up a process for people to come here, visit, understand what's out there, and learn. Not only learn, but connect with others as well, because you can actually set this up on a Teams and they can communicate with each other, kind of encouraging your best makers to share their knowledge, because that's what makes a great community, knowledge sharing. And so while the COE nurturing component is offering training modules, mentorship, and recognition, you are starting a community of practice where the community will then support each other. So not only are you reducing potentially service desk requests about questions that might be related to something very basic, but you're also encouraging people to communicate with each other and share ideas and understand how things might work differently from another person's perspective. And so this balances freedom with accountability. And so the nurturing components is a very actual useful part of your adoption strategy. It's all about recognition and engagement. Alrighty. So moving on to the next component here. So the final component here is the innovation backlog component. The innovation backlog component is a critical piece to kind of managing the constant stream of communication, ideas, and essentially insight from your users. So it's in the name, really. It's a backlog. It's a backlog to kind of give you a structured intake so makers can actually submit ideas and then you can actually score them for ROI or complexity and then use community voting to see what's worth prioritizing. So let's say, for example, your organization requires a let's say a co-pilot agent that combines all of HR data. And someone submits this idea, and then you kind of understand the impact and the ROI, and you realize this is an actual good idea. Now you have it in your backlog that you can actually pick from your backlog and now actually start formulating the POC stage, the development stage, and then hopefully the production stage where then you could actually deploy to your end users. And all of this was born in the innovation backlog application where someone decided to submit that idea and it grew and grew and grew until finally it was finally published for production use. So no more ideas stuck in email threads or hallway conversations. They're always going to be visible. They're always going to be there. They're always going to be prioritized and potentially aligned with your strategic goals. Right. So what does that mean for iLink Digital? At iLink Digital, we just don't install the toolkit and wish you luck, right? We actually meet with you, talk about what you're doing, how you want to do it, and then we tell you how we can help you do that. And so by doing that, we create customizable deployment strategies where we not only install the COE for you, we actually go through the different things that might help you based on what your vision is. So our approach includes not only rapid implementation aligned with your goals, but also proactive security frameworks and ongoing managed services. And we've done this for clients of every size and every time the result is faster adoption with stronger compliance. All righty. So moving on here. Okay. So let's talk about the governance components on sorry, not the governance components, but the pillars of governance. And starting out with the first one, the center of excellence, right? And what it means, right? It's oversight. And so essentially this is your governance anchor. The COE, the center of excellence. So think about it not as a toolkit, but a team, right? The COE should bring together your cross-functional members, not only IT, but also business security compliance. Because as stakeholders of governance, you define ownership clearly. You should define who owns what happens where, and this way you can actually have insights from different team members from different business functions. So all corners kind of all bases are kind of covered, right? And so it also sets the continuous improvement cadence, right? You're meeting frequently, you're kind of understanding how the governance strategy should be formed, how it should be shaped, and you're not just setting policies and forgetting them, you're adapting as your business evolves. So that's one of the benefits of creating a committee, a center of excellence, right? An oversight committee to kind of formulate that strategy, formulate that adoption plan, and make sure you're moving forward according to how your business is moving forward. You're not just going to meet once and come up with a strategy and set and forget, right? You want to consistently improve and evolve. That way, your strategy does not become stale and it allows you to then improve on perhaps a stale strategy. And you don't want to do that, right? You don't want your strategy to stale. You want to continue improving. And that's always the benefit of having committee to allow you to always improve. And so that's just the first pillar of governance, right? The first pillar of governance to allow you to kind of understand, to create that foundation, right? A foundation requires multiple pillars, and this is just the first one. The second pillar is your environment strategy. Your environment strategy should be robust. It should be for understanding what the default environment strategy is. It should be for understanding what dedicated environments are. It should be for understanding your naming conventions. It should be for understanding lifecycle management. And it should be for understanding a promotion process to keep things organized and secure. Your environment strategy should be focused on creating a personal productivity environment. Usually, what that is your default environment becomes now a personal productivity space. So, what that says is your personal productivity space should only be for personal productivity. No longer do you have a default environment where where you're riddled with production level applications and flows. That shouldn't be the case. An appropriate environment strategy, you have dedicated environments for dedicated solutions. This way, you're following best practices through security, DLP, and licensing strategies. And as you can see, once you start going through the different pillars, you understand that each pillar supports each other to create that foundation, like I was talking about before. And these pillars, when put together, they create that solid foundation. So don't think about governance as just an environment strategy. Think about governance as multiple pillars. So we've established the first two pillars with a COE oversight committee, now with an environment strategy pillar. With this particular strategy, you've now created two pillars, right? And now, as you can see here, we're slowly building out the pillars that we're going to build our solid foundation of governance and adoption for the Power Platform. So let's move on to the third pillar. Security and access control. Again, you'll see that all these pillars kind of support one another, right? So when we're talking about security and access, this is about ensuring that the right people have the right level of access and the right through role-based access control. So role-based access control is, so now we've talked about dedicated environments, right? And through these dedicated environments, we have role-based access control. And so for a dedicated environment, for a dedicated solution, you only have specific people accessing that particular environment. And now you can actually become more granular, where this particular dedicated environment can have dedicated makers and dedicated end users. And so the benefit of having a robust security and access control strategy, it allows you to have that granularity for protection, because you don't want you don't want end users to make, right? You don't want end users to start creating in a production environment, potentially muddling up production data, right? So that's one of the benefits of using dedicated environments with dedicated role-based access controls, which are considered security roles in an environment. These security roles are meant there to kind of create those guardrails, these lanes for people to exist in an environment. And with these lanes, you have protection across all resources in an environment. So let's say, for instance, you have a solution that is communicating with a Dataverse table with a dedicated security role. Now you've created this lane where this individual can only access this application and these records of this specific Dataverse table. So you're only allowed to do certain things by following a robust security and access control strategy. And as you can see here, these pillars, these strategies are rolling up into each other, creating that foundation, right? So now we've established a COE foundation, a pillar of COE oversight, a pillar of environment strategy for dedicated environments. And within these dedicated environments, we've created a pillar of security and access. And so as you can see here, now we're starting to have a solid foundation, right? We have a solid foundation through dedicated lanes of access, through dedicated environments, all done through a dedicated COE oversights committee that has created these strategies to allow people to create safely. And so that takes me to the next pillar. The next pillar of our foundational strategy, DLPs, data loss prevention policies. These are your protectors of sensitive data from accidental exposure. Again, through dedicated environments, through dedicated access control, you have dedicated DLP policies. You create dedicated DLP policies for your most dedicated environments, right? So let's say, for instance, you have an environment for your sales department. You're going to allow them to only connect to certain connectors. Like, let's say, for instance, your CRM connector, your email connector, your Teams connector. But we don't want them to connect to anything outside of that, to anything more complicated. So let's say we shut down the HTTP connection. right? We're going to utilize a DLP policy to do that. We're going to only assign them the connectors they need and allow them to only use the connections they need for their solution. And through these strategies, we're effectively mitigating risk of any kind of data that's important to the salespeople not being brought into other places. So as you can see here, with this particular pillar, now we have data in our minds. We have data controlled. So as you can see here, we've established 4 pillars so far. We've started with the COE Oversight Committee that understands that we need to come up with these strategies. The environment strategy pillar, where we have dedicated environments created. We have a security and access control, where we have dedicated permissions, dedicated security roles to create those lanes of access for people to use. And now we have DLP policies where people can use essentially DLPs are lanes as well, right? We have dedicated guardrails for environments to go through because they're dedicated DLP policies. And these policies are set per environment. So as you can see here, we've established these pillars, and now we're building out a more stronger foundation for our Power Platform adoption. And so what does that mean next, right? We've established a place for people to create safely through permissions and connection control. So what does that mean for people that are creating robust applications and solutions, right? We need to think about an ALM strategy. We need to think about how to manage the life cycle of an application. And so ensuring reliable deployments through this ALM strategy will standardize how apps and flows are deployed for production use. Again, this pillar is as important as the other pillars. Without any of these pillars, the foundation will crumble. So this particular pillar, without this pillar, you have no strategy behind deploying. You don't have dedicated environments to deploy to. So as you can see here, by utilizing consistent solution package and version control, we have stability and understanding of how things are being deployed and how things are being managed. And so within the Power Platform, we can actually utilize the Power Platform pipelines to facilitate this experience, this life cycle. And because our environment strategy dictated that we need 3 environments, we now have 3 environments to deploy our solutions through. And based on the ALM strategy, we want a developer environment to develop our solution that has been proven and tested. And now we have a QA test environment, which allows us to deploy to a pilot group or a particular tester group for them to validate our development. And then finally, we have a production environment or production stage where our solution will live for production use, where all the end users are. And as you can see here, our ALM strategy requires a robust security and access control because with three environments, we have 3 different types of security and access that these 3 environments will need. And with these 3 different environments, we require 3 different, potentially 3 different scenarios for 3 different DLPs. In most cases, you would probably use the same DLP for each environment. But as you can see here, depending on your strategy, you could dedicate a whole DLP for each environment. Let's say, for instance, in your development environment, you probably have more connectors available for the developers to kind of show the test and work through. Versus your production environment, you have a very restrictive DLP policy, which then you're ready kind of deploy using the Power Platform pipelines. And so the Power Platform pipelines make deployments reliable and repeatable because you don't want deployment to be a crutch to your deployment process. So it's one of the benefits of using the Power Platform pipelines because before you would have to rely on manual exporting, importing of the solution, and it wasn't ideal, right? It was never ideal. You never wanted to do any of that. And actually, to give you guys a little bit more of a context, this is actually a much newer feature from the Power Platform. What we used to recommend and what Microsoft used to recommend as well is utilizing Azure DevOps and using actual CI/CD pipelines to deploy your solutions. And that required a whole other conversation, right? Because some organizations didn't even use Azure DevOps. So where where would your ALM strategy go? It would go into exploring other applications. But the good folks at Microsoft, what they did was they took all that back end knowledge of how these pipelines works and added it into the Power Apps portal through these fancy interfaces. Now we have pipelines in the Power Platform, which is good news because standing up Azure DevOps is a whole other discussion, like I was saying. Alrighty. So we've established 5 pillars of excellence, right? We've established 5 pillars of strategy, 5 pillars of governance. As you can see here, our foundation is getting stronger and stronger the more we talk about these pillars. And so the next one we have here is the monitoring, auditing, and reporting aspect of our strategy. So your strategy, your governance strategy can't govern what it can't see, right? So this particular pillar gives you insights into real-time dashboards and usage analytics and audit logs for compliance and proactive alerts when something looks off. So this particular strategy is leaning on the existing components of the starter kit, but also can be accelerated utilizing your own solutions for monitoring, auditing, and reporting. Again, this strategy should be based on understanding, maintaining clear oversight of everything data-wise. So you want to understand how compliant applications are based on your environment security and DLP processes are and your ALM processes are. Let's say, for example, you have an application that's currently in the default environment that's being actively shared with a lot of people. Well, that no longer is compliant to your strategy. And now you have pinpointed an application that needs to go through the environment process so they can have dedicated environments and allow them to actually develop and deploy through the ALM process as well. So think about it as your warning system to kind of spot risks before they become actual incidents, because we don't want to cause any mishap in the personal productivity environment, because that's one thing you don't want to do, because the personal productivity environment should be a safe space for developing personal things or testing things, just for people to kind of land to and test out the Power Platform. So by mitigating these risks, you potentially save yourself by making the personal productivity even stricter. Because again, part of your environment strategy is to base the personal productivity through a safe DLP process, DLP policy. So you're not creating too much sprawl, I would consider it. All right. As you can see here, we are establishing solid pillars in our foundation. We're only getting stronger and stronger as we go on. We've established the COE oversight committee that will be there to kind of evolve each strategy. We've established an environment strategy where we have your personal productivity environment. We have dedicated environments for dedicated solutions. And we have security and access control strategies where we've created lanes, guardrails for these dedicated environments for these users to interact with these dedicated environments. And then we have a DLP policy strategy where, again, we've created lanes, guardrails for these environments to swim through safely, right? And then we've also created an an ALM strategy where we have applications to, again, we've created ALM lanes, guardrails for these applications and flows to swim through safely and securely. And then our latest pillar here, monitoring and auditing reporting strategies, where we have strategies to allow us to alert us and be aware, reactive to any potential risks that might come about. And it allows us to then evolve. So again, all of these pillars are very important. This particular pillar is going to be your main pillar that you're going to be using to understand how to evolve. So it's always important to you to establish that clear oversight. And another important pillar coming up here is your adoption and change management, which is foundational in your nurturing component from the starter kit. Again, another very important pillar. Without this pillar, you have very limited, insight on how to evolve. Your analytics might tell you one thing, but the users might tell you another thing. I feel like organizations evolve much more efficiently through understanding what their users want and what they're doing, right? So successful governance relies on people. That's why you need the dedicated training programs, clear communication, easy to find documentation, and also feedback channels. And so with the nurturing component, you have this particular feedback channel, which is called the COE Pulse, which allows you to essentially check the pulse on the Power Platform for your end users. So what does this promote? It promotes confidence in your makers so they can fully understand the rules and feel that they're heard when they have ideas to improve them. So we don't want to overbear the users with all these rules, right? We want to have them understand that it's a feedback system. It's a feedback loop, right? That we're establishing through these governance strategies for the Power Platform. Because any kind of overbearing governance, it stunts growth. It will stunt adoption. So you want to establish this early on and have that communicative feedback loop. Because again, being a pillar of your foundational strategy, it's very important. So what have we created so far? We've created the COE Oversight Committee as our first pillar. Second pillar, our environment strategy, where we have personal productivity environments, dedicated environments. We have security and access control pillar, where we've created the necessary access and controls for these dedicated environments for users to kind of interact with. And then we have DLP policies, where we've created these lanes for environments to effectively swim through safely and security. And then we have ALM strategies where flows and apps can swim through efficiently, safely, and securely. And we have monitoring and auditing and reporting, where where we're creating major oversight into how the platform is behaving and how things are going on. And now we have this particular pillar where we understand adoption and change. And part of this particular strategy is essentially creating a feedback loop so people are heard, right? So we're promoting adoption. We're promoting the platform to evolve. And again, each and one of these pillars are very important to one another, but also they're very important in itself. So the next pillar, cost and license management. So what does this mean for governance? Governance helps control costs. So by tracking license allocations, monitoring premium connector usage, forecasting future needs, you ensure that your investment stays efficient. Because again, once adoption is rolling, it's like a snowball effect, right? You're going to have multiple people, multiple business functions utilizing the Power Platform. All of a sudden, you're going to reach a point where your capacity is reaching the limit. And now you have to kind of understand, okay, well, maybe I should have created a more robust cost and license strategy, how to manage capacity, how to manage add-ons for AI build credits, how to manage, how to allocate capacity, how to allocate credits, right? So all of this is based in the fact that once you have dedicated environments, once you have dedicated DLPs, once you have dedicated ALM strategies, you have dedicated license strategies as well. So let's say, for instance, you're creating environments for people that are going to be creating solutions that require capacity, which in turn requires premium connectors. Now you have in one environment. And so let's say, for instance, you want to go through a pay-as-you-go model for these particular environments. So now that you have dedicated environments, now you have a dedicated pay-as-you-go model. So you're not ever reaching that limit in terms of capacity because it's all about controlling the costs. You don't want to buy more capacity. You want to control capacity. And so by having dedicated environments, dedicated DLP policies, and a dedicated licensing management strategy, you're going to be controlling these costs. And as you may know, analyzing consumption at the Power Platform level can be daunting. So by having these conversations up front, you can understand how the consumption works, where things are going, and then how to get reports, how to get data to understand consumption, and then you could understand how to allocate capacity more efficiently. And so without this, organizations often overspend on essentially unused licenses or run into capacity shortages unexpectedly. So it's always good to have a cost and licensing strategy. So what does this all mean, right? We've essentially established a strong foundation through these pillars. The cost and licensing management is your final and standing pillar for your foundation. So through establishing a COE committee, an oversight committee, you've created that oversight to understand how adoption should work. And through this committee, you want to build out the following pillars of dedicated environments. Through these dedicated environments, dedicated access control through the security roles. And through these environments, dedicated DLP policies so these environments can effectively exist safely and securely. And through these solutions within these environments, you create a dedicated ALM strategy. So Power Apps and Flows can essentially be deployed safely and securely. And then you have your monitoring and auditing reporting strategy, where you have an oversight on how things are evolving from an analytical lens, right? And then you have another lens through adoption and change, through these feedback loops that you've established. And now through the cost and licensing management pillar, you understand how things should be costing, where your money is going to, where it could go into. And so now that we've established these pillars, you have a good foundational structure to then build on top. Because again, this is just your foundation, right? we can accelerate further from this foundation. We can expand, we can integrate with other systems. For example, there's one example, right? Purview has a lot of integration into the Power Platform where you can actually accelerate your auditing processes. You can accelerate your data protection processes just, right off the bat, right? So think about establishing your foundation first, and then think about accelerating after based on your feedback loops, based on your monitoring and auditing reporting. And so these are just, these are just strategies to kind of essentially formulate that foundation. And so what does that mean for the Power Platform governance? So like just to kind of go over some good best practices, right? We want to prioritize clear ownership and accountability. No more guessing who owns an app. With these established strategies, you kind of prioritize the accountability and understand who actually owns them, right? So if you follow these best practices through the foundation we established, you are going to see your platform flourish. So what we do next is hold regular governance meetings. Policies shouldn't collect us. You should always be evolving. You should have feedback loops so you communicate these policies clearly and often. You have good governance, because good governance is worthless if no one knows the rules, right? And also, you should be performing audits and assessments regularly. And also, you should invest in training and document everything. When people have clear guidance, they're more likely to comply. And so let's talk about what can go wrong, right? And how to fix it. Because I understand that not all of us are starting with a Power Platform that's bare, that has nothing, right? So let's talk about unmanaged app growth. What's our solution? Dedicated environments, solution segmentation, and regular audits so this doesn't happen anymore. Security and compliance risks. Let's say there's people utilizing connectors that they no longer should be using. We have dedicated DLP and strict access controls. We have low user adoption or potential pushback. We should be establishing that nurturing component. We should be establishing clear training, strong internal communication through these feedback loops, and recognition for compliance makers or compliant makers. And so through these lessons, we need to kind of bring client engagement to the forefront, right? And these are just the more common challenges we see out there from people that have established a Power Platform for years but have no real governance strategy. And so with these 3 quick solutions, you can actually tackle majority of the problems that we see out there. And so how do you measure if your particular foundation, your governance plan is working? What you could do is actually track number of compliant versus non-compliant apps. You could understand user engagement and adoption rates. You can have security incident frequency and severity checks. You can have speed and efficiency of maker onboarding. You could have accuracy and timeliness of audit reporting. And so, again, to bring us back to our main statement here, governance is never a set and forget. It's a means to measure, adjust, and improve. So once you've set up your pillars of excellence through the different pillars, you've created your foundation for the Power Platform. You are ready. You're ready for the Power Platform governance. And just to kind of bring us home here, you don't have to do this alone, right? We at iLink offer all these strategies custom to you. So if you ever have the need to contact us about anything we just talked about, feel free to reach out and let us know where we can help, how we can help, because a lot of these strategies require endless conversation because a lot of organizations are different. Not one shoe doesn't fit every, whatever the saying is, right? So what we offer at iLink Digital is that hand holding, right? That walkthrough, that tailored strategic recommendation, and that allows us to create that custom strategy for you guys. Because again, not all companies are the same. So if you'll feel the need to contact us, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put something in the chat for us to use. Feel free to use that QR code in the chat to contact us. And again, ask us anything about governance. We'll be there to kind of receive any questions, provide any kind of assessment, provide any kind of strategic recommendation directly tailored to what your organization needs. And so with that being said, I'd love to hear your questions, big or small. What challenges are you facing? What concerns do you have about implementing governance? Let's have a conversation, right? So feel free to ask any questions. Any questions about how we do it for others? Any questions about the different pillars of governance, or any technical questions about any of the components that we covered today as well? Feel free to ask. All right. If no one has any questions, that's okay. You could always contact me later using the QR code here. Feel free to email me anytime. That's completely fine with any questions, any insights, feedback, or anything like that. But I do want to thank everyone for attending today and joining us on iLink's digital presentation on governance in the Power Platform. And if anyone needs any kind of clarity or questions answers, again, feel free to reach out. I thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you.